Tara Dane, I am so excited to have you here on this podcast series and this legacy interview series for Lions of the Law that we've been doing in conjunction with the Collier County Bar Association. And Judge Cunningham has been nice enough to put this together for us.
I'm really excited to be here with Tara.
Well, I'm excited to be here with both of you because this is very special. And I'm glad that you guys took this on because so many of the people that are so important aren't here anymore and we don't have their stories.
And exactly. So this is to preserve the stories of the legal legends that we've had through the years from the Collier County Bar Association. And it is produced in conjunction with the For the Birds podcast, which is my podcast show. And that kind of comes out because I have an injury law firm named Cardinal Law, and I've always said that getting injured is for the birds. So that's where For the Birds came about. And a lot of people don't know that. So I figured I would give a little plug in the beginning to
now that I have a broken
that.
foot, I can totally agree with you that being injured is for the birds.
All right. So I have a little introduction for you, if you don't mind, before we get started.
Okay,
and I'm just going to read it off real quick because I think you're one of the best mediators that I have ever had the opportunity to work for and with. And I think that a lot of the other lawyers in Collier County and beyond would say the same thing about you.
Well, I totally appreciate that. That's very humbling and kind.
Well, we're going to ask you about some mediation tips and tricks that you can pass along to the next generation once we get into our interview questions. But let me start with this. Most lawyers think the hardest part of a case is the law. The best trial lawyers know the truth. The hardest part is people. Pride, fear, ego, grief, control, and when those things take over, cases don't just get difficult, they get stuck. So when cases in Naples got stuck, when they needed someone who could calmly walk into a room full of tension and get it moving again, one name kept coming up. Tara Miller Dane has been a Naples resident for over 5 decades, a Florida lawyer since 1980, and a full-time mediator since 1996. She's known not for noise, not for ego, but for getting cases done. In 2004, she was voted Woman Lawyer of the Year by the CCBA Women's Bar Association, and later Lion of the Law. Today isn't about tips for mediation. This is about how you became the person people call when things have to get done. So welcome, Tara, to the show. We're very excited to have you here and to talk to you about mediation. All right, first question. Let's talk about you being a Naples resident for over 55 years. That means you've watched this place transform.
Completely and totally. I was just sharing with Debbie on the ride here. Since I can't drive, she picked me up and was my Uber. Did a great job. And it was a one-horse town for sure. Believe it or not, my dad was the first cardiologist here. He was doctor number 6, and there was one grocery store in Naples, Florida. There was a gravel road to Fort Myers to the American department store where you did your shopping for clothing, etc. And there was what they called the Quonset hut on 3rd Street, which is like a tin can cut in half. That's where the movie theater was. And that was it.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. So that's the Naples that you remember. What did that environment teach you about people?
Well, it was very close-knit, and everybody knew what everybody was doing, which frankly always drove me crazy. But it made you realize you have to pay attention to what you're doing because you take one wrong step and everybody in the whole town knows who's done what, who's been where, and etc. And it was a very good way to grow up because you were very close to all of your neighbors and your friends, and everybody was very supportive. And you didn't have all these activities that the kids went to. You basically had, neighborhood kick the can games. You'd build forts. You would be doing tag. You'd be outside all the time playing without all these organized events. And in a way, I think that's kind of nice because now everything is so different with the way people are growing up. But it was very simple, but it was very family oriented.
Do you think that there's something that outsiders don't quite get about Collier County that you only get if you've been here for such a long time?
I don't really feel that way because, frankly, I've kind of enjoyed watching it grow. At some points, I think there's getting to be too much density and too much this or that. But it is such an incredible place to have watched flourish and bloom. And, the arts that we have here now and the plays and the restaurants and, it's just really grown into a beautiful cosmopolitan city. So when it was such a tiny, tiny little town, part of us would just be like, we're so bored. There's nothing to do here. Well, now, there's a ton to do. And you can be in this town for 10 years and never run into the people that are in the same town. So there's pluses and minuses. But in the whole, I think it's been an interesting process to watch.
Yeah, certainly. Did you have any family values growing up that were non-negotiables?
My family was kind of wild and crazy. My mom was born in Cuba to American parents, and she met my dad on the train to Duke. And basically, I grew up speaking Spanish before English, so we had all of that kind of interesting thing going on. And my mom and dad, raised us to go to church and to be very close-knit with our family members. And we had a lot of family gatherings. And a lot of, people would come and they'd be at our house. And they entertained at home a lot, but it was just family time. So it was good. They taught you what was right, what was wrong. Mm-hmm. My dad was Germanic, the work ethic, strict. But my mom was the funny, kind of humorous one that was always kidding around. So the two were quite a good foil for each other.
What was the moment that you first thought that you needed to go to law school?
I was just sharing with her, it wasn't anything that I ever really thought about for a long time. I had gone to Duke University and didn't get in there till the January term instead of the September. So I had to take some extra classes to graduate with my class on time, and just randomly I signed up for a law course and I loved it and I enjoyed it so much. I just, as a fluke, applied for the LSAT and didn't really have any idea whether I'd get in there or not, and I did, and I went to University of Miami.
Was there anybody that influenced you to go to law school?
Nope, not really.
Interesting. Was there anybody that you called before law school to get advice on whether to go or not?
No, it just kind of happened. And I'm a person who very much believes that when things are put in front of you, you have to sort of grab them and go. If something comes there, there's a reason why it came there. And I just had a really, really good feeling about that. And I just decided to do it. And I hated law school, but I loved being a lawyer, and I loved every bit of the litigation. And then when I had to transfer over to mediation, that was really my calling. I really enjoyed that tremendously.
Was there anything that law school did not prepare you for the practice of law that you learned while you were practicing?
I don't think law
Probably
school prepares you for anything.
Everything.
I mean, nothing. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it taught you how to think, but they never showed you what a mortgage looked like. They never showed you what a deed looked like. They never helped you do a real estate closing. They didn't show you what a trial was like. No. It didn't prepare you for anything. Absolutely nothing.
I'd have to second that. Unfortunately, you learn trial by fire when you get out, and it's kind of like a fire hose too, and you hold on for dear life until you figure out what's going on.
Oh, no. And no, seriously. I mean, that's absolutely true.
Oh, man. All right. So take us back to your early years of practicing in Collier County. What was the legal community like back then?
It was very interesting. It was very close-knit. I was one of the few female lawyers there, and they were... it was a good old boy club. I mean, really, the women were kind of looked at as sort of a bit more superfluous. But I ended up working for a retired judge with Janet J., and I got out in August, but he dropped dead in March. And he used to have us walk behind him. They used to call us Charlie's Angels. And then he had a heart attack on a Sunday. I had never been into court by myself. And the next day, I had to go to court and handle all his files.
Oh, my goodness.
And just like that, I was thrown in the fire. And literally, one of the motions that I went and did the thing as best as I could. I won the motion, and the other lawyer drafted the order for the judge as if he had won it. So if you don't think that I started learning pretty quickly what this is going to be, you have to just balls to the wall, off you go. So it was fun and challenging and scary, but great, because you had to learn. And back then you didn't have a specialty. So I was doing things like, mortgage foreclosures and, criminal cases, because I had worked at the public defender's office during law school, and also civil cases and divorce cases and personal injury cases. So you learned a little bit of everything. Which
wow.
Later really served me well as a mediator, because most people now, when they get out of law school, they go into a field. But I was doing a very, very general practice, which was great. So for issue spotting for a mediator, that's great.
Absolutely, yeah. You get a little experience with everything.
What was it like being a female attorney here in the early 80s?
Challenging, because people didn't take you very seriously. I mean, literally. I mean, the first time I walked in and I had a motion with Judge Carlton, who unfortunately has passed. He was a wonderful man. But the other lawyer that was there, he just walked up and they were all the good buddies and stuff. And I was trembling and walking in with my case law. And the other lawyer looked and said, "What is that?" And I said, "It's my cases." He goes, "We don't do that here. You just go up and argue in front of the judge." And I said, "Well, no, I'm taking this." And the judge smiled because he was hearing the whole thing. He goes, "Miss Miller, approach the bench." And I was handed in the case law and handed the other lawyer. And I did my thing, probably very ineptly. But at the end of the whole thing, he goes, and then the other lawyer did his thing sort of off the cuff without any cases. He goes, "Well, I happen to agree with Miss Miller. You won the motion." And that guy just about died. And I thought to myself, well, that's what you just have to do and not be scared. But he was kind of miffed. I should have just gone up there and, winged it and see what happened. But it made me have to work harder and try harder to get the job done and to have people take you seriously.
Who were some of the attorneys that you went up against regularly that gave you a good run for your money back then?
There were very good attorneys. There were not any really bad attorneys there. I mean, all the early ones. I mean, George Vega, he was there, but he liked to wing it a lot. But, there were a lot of lawyers, though, that were very, very good. People just... Judge Carlton was interesting. I don't know if you ever got to meet him or practice it from, but if he gave you 10 minutes... you had to get it all out, and you better do it in 5 because the other one has 5. So he taught you how to get to the point, and he didn't like any, flollering around. So it was good. You learned how to get up, do what you had to do, and take your licks, or be glad that you won and move on to the next one.
Do you remember one of your very first cases that might stand out in your mind? And
I had to do a criminal case where I was sharing with her on the ride here that you used to be able to sign up for the criminal cases if there was a conflict with the public defender's office. So the guy had a 9-page confession that he had signed, and he had been in that jail for almost 9 months waiting to come to trial. And it was against Joel Dyfick. And I kept wanting to get a plea, and they wouldn't give me any kind of pleas. And so I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to have to try this case. And I had practiced everything so hard and done it all. And then the day that it was the trial, the office I had was 5 minutes from the courtroom. I had forgot all of my note cards. And so I had to, my knees were shaking, and I'm in front of Judge Carlton, and he says, "What's wrong, Miss Miller?" I said, I don't have my note cards. The poor jury probably thought, this poor guy is being represented by, who is this woman? But he let me go back and get them. And I'll be darned if he did not get off for credit for time served. And that was great. That was such a big thing and a good learning lesson. But you just can't give up, because sometimes you just have to do your best. And who knows, maybe they felt sorry for the guy and for me, and so they let him do that.
That's funny. Was there anybody in your early career that shaped how you practiced law, or that may have been a mentor for you when you first started?
John Aspel was a good mentor, because I had done a lot of the family law practice, and he was doing a lot of the very high-end divorce cases. And, there were hardly any women around back then at all. And so what I realized is that what was happening is they were making all of the wives of the lawyers go out of town, because none of the Naples lawyers would ever take a case of a lawyer's wife. So I decided, well, this is a good little niche. So I took a case, and one of the cases was against one of his ex-wives. And he called me up and he said, "Well, I don't think you know how things work here." And I said, "What does that mean?" He goes, "Well, we don't do this. We don't do this. They need to go somewhere else to get the representation." And I said, "Well, starting today, they don't."
I'm doing it.
So it was great. We butted heads back and forth all over the place. And at the end of it, he says, "All right, I'm going to take you to lunch." And he took me to lunch, and he said, "I appreciated how you handled everything." And he goes, "I need you to just remember, you're getting to come across me a lot. And he said, I need you to raise your rates, and I want to tell you how to do this and how to do this and how to do better with this. So he really did mentor me. And we had a really good respect for each other, and we handled a lot of good cases against each other. But you learn by making mistakes and trying to do better.
That's true. And I've found, any mistakes that I've made over the years, you hopefully make them against a good lawyer who can work with you, and you don't screw anything up too bad. You can't really screw anything up too bad other than a statute of limitations issue or, maybe a couple other things. But, if you work with most of the lawyers in town are incredibly good to work with, and they're forgiving. And, they won't try to stick things in that you might miss or try to pull one over on you. I think that there is a very collegial atmosphere that we have in the
No, and I'll
Collier
tell
County
you,
Bar.
as a mediator, I was very clear about that, because there were several times when a mistake was absolutely made, and I made sure and took it to the other one, and they said, well, no, you can't say anything. I said, yes, it's my job to say something, so I'm not going to let that go, because next time it could be you. And on my watch, that doesn't happen. So I tried to bend over backwards during my mediation with the agreements to make sure that everything was done as properly as possible, because anybody can make a mistake. And there's no reason that the client should suffer from that. So that's just not fair.
Yeah, I agree. Was there ever a moment that you thought when you were practicing law that, this is exactly why I became a lawyer?
Mediation, every mediation I went to, I loved it.
I love that.
Yeah, because I had been going through a lot of personal issues myself. I had a multiply handicapped child that couldn't walk, couldn't talk, and he wasn't supposed to live a day. He ended up living 29 years, but nobody hardly even knew that I had him at home. But I took 6 years off, and when he didn't pass, I decided I had to go do something else. But I realized, because I had had so many problems myself, it really helped me with compassion and to just try to listen to not only what people were telling me, but what they weren't telling me. And I was very blessed to have a gift to kind of be able to, no matter who the people were or what their issues were or how mad or angry they were, to find some commonality with them, to get them to trust me to help them. And more often than not, it worked.
Yeah, and that must have given you a level of patience and understanding that other people may not necessarily
I think
have.
that's exactly correct. And then after I ended up getting divorced after almost 20 years, that was a whole nother learning experience. So, and I had 2 brothers that passed very early. So all of those complicated difficulties actually made me a way better mediator.
Interesting. Did you find any I don't know, going through all those experiences, did you find any sort of spirituality or
Oh, always. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's kept me going.
Yeah.
If I didn't have that, I would not be sitting here still. I would have been off a cliff miles and years ago.
Yeah.
But absolutely. I prayed before every mediation to try to help every single person that I met.
That is awesome.
And then the cool thing about it is sometimes he'd give me these ideas, and I'm like, at first I wouldn't listen to it because I said, that sounds crazy. But then I started leaning in. And he gave me ideas that I never would have had on my own, and it helped me. I can't tell you how many times I had mediations where people said, I never thought that would get resolved, and it did. And that was really, and I don't take that I had the magical thing. I think I was just being given the gifts to help the people.
I was going to say that's almost like your mediation became your spiritual gift that you were able to
It
help
totally
other
was.
people through
No, it totally-
difficult situations.
It totally was.
I love
And
that.
it was very, and then the nice thing is at the end of the day, it's done. It's not a 3-year commitment with somebody that's driving you crazy. They could drive you, every one of them could drive you crazy, but it's done. So there's some nice finality to that.
I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
There's a story that some of the ladies tell at our Women of the Year get-togethers about how the forming of the women's bar.
Uh-huh.
And I want to hear.
You know what? That all happened when I was staying at home with Cody, so I really didn't have much to do with that at all, and I don't know much about it because I was gone basically from about 1986 for about 6 years because I stayed at home.
When you came back into the legal profession,
I just came in as a mediator.
as a mediator.
In 1990.
What was it like were there more women lawyers in town? And
yeah,
what
yeah.
did you see as the difference?
I just think what was really nice, the women bar was an incredibly important thing. And I think Sharon Hanlon had an awful lot to do with that. And I think what it did is it helped women be supportive of women. We had a small group back when we started, and we were very supportive. We would go to lunch all the time together. We would invite the judges one-on-one, and all the judges loved it when they got to go out with the lady lawyers. But no, we were very supportive then, but we were a super, super small group. Now it's just so different because people can mentor each other. They can refer things to each other. They can answer questions. But I can't take any credit for that at all because I was not part of that.
Were you part of the lunches at Margot's?
That was a little later because we had our lunches at very simple places before that. So, I mean, really, there was a 6-year period where I was just totally out of the legal field, completely.
What was it like to come back from
It was scary.
practicing law to go into mediation?
It was very scary. But, you know, I had a child that was very, very severely handicapped, and he could end up in the hospital at any time, and he did frequently. So it's one thing to cancel a mediation, and it's another thing to cancel a trial that's been set for 3 years. So I just realized that I was going to have to make some changes. And I had to go back economically. I went through 6 years, I went through 10 years worth of savings. So I had to go back and try something new.
Wow.
But it ended up working out great.
What tips do you have for somebody doing a change like that and really in the middle of their career?
Don't be scared. If circumstances change that you have to change, lean into it. And, for me, it was just faith in God and just trust that even if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you'll be given the gifts to do what you need to do.
I want to ask a couple more questions about some of your early thoughts of the bar. And were there any traditions that stuck out in your mind that you remember from the CCBA as a young bar?
No, because see, that's what I was trying to tell her. During that period of time that I was gone for the 6 years, that's when a lot of that was formed, and I didn't have that experience.
Okay. If you had to describe the CCBA during your prime years of involvement in just a couple words, do you have any words to describe the CCBA?
I think that it's encouragement. I think that it is people helping people and people wanting the best from each other. And, when I grew up, a lot of times, women just didn't seem to be as helpful to each other. They were more jealous or this or that. But in that organization, you don't see that at all. It's all about what can I do to help you, which I think is super refreshing.
Interesting. Did you devote significant time to pro bono cases while you were practicing?
I'll be honest with you, I did not. I always gave money to the legal aid, and I did that way. But, as a mediator, I didn't have to have all that liability insurance and stuff. And so that was one of the big reasons too. But so I did not. I gave the money, but I was not out there practicing law. Plus, when you're a mediator, and you're not keeping up with necessarily all the law stuff either.
Yeah.
So I just didn't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, that's true. And you didn't need to. I mean, you weren't litigating cases actively. You were mediating for people.
No, I never. Yeah, when I did mediation, it was full-time mediation. So I didn't do the half and the half or any of that stuff.
Okay. For young lawyers that are starting out, is there any advice that you would give them to avoid some mistakes that you might have seen over the years?
Don't do anything that you don't want to read about in the front page of the Naples Daily News.
That's good advice.
That was told to me by Vicky Ho. And honestly, she said that so many years ago. Do not write an email. Do not write a text. Do not make a comment. Do not do anything that you don't want to be on the front page of the Naples Daily News. And I will tell you, the one thing that I do find very shocking is that, some of the letters that attorneys are writing to each other, it's just so disrespectful and so discourteous and so not appropriate. And I've even seen people in mediations who are treating the other attorneys with disrespect, and not on my watch. And so I just think attorneys need to be respectful of the profession. We need to be respectful of our other people's clients, and you need to do the very best you can to lift people up. Because there's certain lawyers, no matter how far in the mud the other side goes, they will not go down. And it's so interesting to have a mediation with a lawyer that just loves to sling all the dirty mud and the other one who doesn't. And it's fun to watch how it works. But, you don't have to get down there in the mud and sling. You can figure out how to stay above it.
Well, talking about professionalism, what did it mean to you when you were named Lion of the Law?
I was really shocked, to be honest with you, Debbie. No, totally. Because I always kept very under the wire, and I wasn't, because of my son at home, and I had another perfectly healthy son who was super active in all the sports. I didn't have time to be volunteering to every, place known to mankind. And I was so under the radar. I almost thought it was a joke when they first told me. I said, what is this? Is this a joke or something? Because I didn't know why they would want to pick me to do that. And I wasn't even a litigator. So that just came so out of left field. I did not understand it at all.
I think you may have thought that you were under the radar, but every time I remember, you were always at every bar event and every women's bar event and every event that every lawyer ever went to. And
well, I
saw
loved
you
going
involved.
to those things, but I felt like a lot of those other people that got that, they were on 50,000, heading this committee and making that thing happen and this thing happen. I just did not physically have. I tried to do my very best in my profession and my very best for my family, and I just didn't have that extra time to go do all those miraculous things. So, I mean, really, you could have knocked me over with a feather when they said that. I honestly thought it was a joke at first.
Oh no! Well, I would say otherwise, and also say that you're the person that people call to get tough cases resolved.
Well, I appreciate that. I loved my job. It was very fun. It was very difficult at times, but it was very rewarding, and it was challenging. It's like a puzzle. It's like having this incredibly interesting puzzle, and you don't know at the beginning if any of the pieces are ever going to come together. And then as you get to know the different people, and I did a lot of mediation where sometimes there were 5 and 6 different parties. So, you're really having to try to figure out the people. And that is one of the most important things, because it's not what they're saying. It's who they are and how did they get where they are. Because so many times that can unlock the mystery about how best to help solve the problem.
What tactics did you use when you encountered difficult situations where attorneys would dig in the mud and they wouldn't give up a position or their...
Because you know what, Eric, I started to just really get to know a lot of these lawyers that I worked with, and I worked with them over and over and over, and they respected me and I respected them. And sometimes I'd even call somebody out literally into the hall and just have a little chat with them. And like, really? I'm going, yeah. And so I mean, I felt comfortable enough that I would speak if I thought things were getting kind of off haywire. And usually those people were respectful enough they didn't even realize they were getting that bad either. So it was a mutual respect, I think. And just people, I think, knew inherently that I had their good intentions at heart for the lawyers and for the people. So I was trying to make this work. So if you're in my mediation and you're kind of going off the rails, then you're going to appreciate me telling you to kind of watch it, because you may not even realize you're doing it.
Right. And I also remember that you would call after hours even if you thought that a case could get resolved, and you'd spend, well into the evening trying to get cases resolved. You went above and beyond. Oh
my God, it's one of the things that was so exhausting, because I just would not give up. My dad would say, that's one of your best and your worst qualities. But, finally they say, are you just trying to, exhaust us? And I'm like, because if I knew that it could get done, I just didn't want to stop.
You didn't give up?
No, I didn't. I mean, it was almost relentless. I'm sure it was exhausting. My son is so funny. He calls me the interrogator, because what I had to end up doing in a very short period of time is, you have to learn as much as you can about these people. So, if you put me in a room with anybody for about 5 minutes, no matter who they are, in 5 minutes, I will find out more information about them and find out some commonality. And once you get that commonality, it gives you a link to be able to connect. And I think that's what we don't do enough in this world anymore, is connect to people. So I love even, doing conversations in random store lines. And it's just, I like people. And I think that's been my biggest gift, is to really inherently like the human race.
What is there any specific qualities that make a truly great lawyer that you've seen over the years?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the best qualities of people with a good moral compass, somebody who is very respectful of other people, somebody who works hard, and somebody who tries to problem solve, and somebody who doesn't, not someone who, if you make a mistake, step up and admit it and try to fix it, and someone who tries to treat people properly.
I like that. In your experience, what is mediation truly about, and what helps cases get resolved?
It's just problems. It's people's problems. And part of the problem is sometimes the lawyers end up becoming the problems. No, I'm dead serious about that. I think part of the problem is that as lawyers, the way I was raised in 1980 is we are problem solvers. And I think sometimes people don't see themselves that way anymore. They think that they're all out there being warriors with swords and trying to decimate the other side and, make your client feel like you're really doing your job. You have to make the other side feel terrible. That's not what this is all about. That's not helpful. And, that's, in my mind, what makes everything worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that can make a case very complex unnecessarily sometimes.
And some people like that, because some people like all the conflict, they like all the drama, and it also means they can just keep billing and billing and billing and billing and billing. If the case gets settled, then there's no more billing and billing and billing and billing. But a truly good lawyer is going to want to try to get the best result for the client as soon as possible, because that's what's going to give them a good reputation to get more clients.
Yeah, I agree. Is that what you'd say that good lawyers do in mediation, is they try to get the best results for their clients, or is there anything else?
But I think there's a difference too. You have to be careful, because this is another problem. Sometimes the lawyers think they know what is best for the client, and sometimes the client has a totally different agenda. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to be willing to say, okay, I know I could get a better result in court for this person, but it's not my litigation, and there is something that is left on the table by trying to get that extra X amount of dollars or that extra thing. And I think the better lawyers learn to defer to their clients, and some of them are too stubborn and their egos get in the way, and they don't settle cases that their clients want settled.
Yeah, interesting. So you said when you walk into a room and you try to understand people within 5 minutes and find a commonality, what is it that is there anything specific that you listen for when you're trying to figure somebody out?
Just everything. Just, feel their, what is their vibe? I mean, are they stressed out? Are they mad? Are they tense? Are they in pain? Just try to get a good sense of who that person is.
I like that. And then obviously that comes into handy in mediations for sure. How do you keep it fair in mediations?
It's not my job to keep it fair. It's my job to problem solve it. And problem solving isn't always fair.
Got it.
Because some people get themselves into things that they shouldn't have gotten into, and that's not necessarily going to go their way. So it doesn't mean that everything gets cut in half and 50-50. Sometimes settlement may not seem fair to one side because one side made bad decisions.
I've always heard that in mediation, nobody's happy, and that's the goal of a good mediation, is everybody leaves kind of unhappy.
I kind of don't agree with that, because I think if you do your job correctly, you should get enough so that each side recognizes. If you have a good mediator, the good mediator should get people what they need, at least in that situation. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll make the people repeat it. okay, because I know you're going to call your lawyer up tomorrow and you're going to be mad that you settled this case, because I put a lot of pressure on both sides to get it done, and I give them good logical reasons. But then they go home and they forget. So I said, repeat after me, and I make them say, and sometimes I even made them write it down. These are the reasons why this is a good settlement. Boom, 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 boom. Because, they'd wake up the next day and they'd forget all the reasons why they did it. But, it just, I think it helped the lawyers too. Because then the lawyers would remember what it is that they had agreed to and why. And so, when they got the call the next day. And you don't always get the call, but some people get very stressed out and they don't remember why they agreed to do what they did. And there was a good reason why they did it. What was the longest mediation? Yeah. Oh, dear God. I had some that went till 3 a.m.
Oh, my goodness.
No, actually, there was one. I left, and then they went on till 5 a.m. Wow.
I don't even know how you can think at that time.
Well, let me just say, it was pretty darn interesting. This was one of the most interesting things that has happened. It was 2 sisters that were in this huge multi-state litigation and had so many bazillion lawyers. Literally, I walked into, I'm not going to mention names of the firm, but it was the hugest conference table, and all the way around the conference table, there were lawyers representing. One whole row was for one sister and one was for the other. And the sisters had been in litigation for like 5 years in multiple states. It was huge stakes. And I just sat there and I was just shocked. And do you know how I started the whole mediation? It blew people's minds.
Wow.
They were so mad. But it was one of those ideas that I got from him. And I said, okay, well, we're going to start. And I said, well, this is my hourly rate. I want everyone to go around the table and please tell us what your hourly rate is. Well, they were just miffed. And so we went around, and one guy didn't even know. I said, well, I find that hard to believe that you have been representing this person for 5 years and you don't know your hourly rate. Well, we're just going to assign you blank. And so we went all the way around the table. And good Lord, by the time you added it all up, it was something like $3,180 per minute. And so every single time, there were that many lawyers, Eric. I'm not kidding you. And so every time they were stuck, I'd say, okay, ladies, I want you to remember $3,180 per minute. Is this really worth arguing over? But the funniest thing is I finally got those 2 women to get it, that they were being taken to the flippin' cleaners by these bozos and bozaz. But anyway, it did get settled. And wow. I mean, I don't think any of those people thought that was going to happen. But finally, the ladies had just had it. So and I had another mediation the next day. So I had to leave before it was all wrapped up and done. But I said, now, don't you girls leave here without getting this done. You got to call me in the middle of the night if you need to. But that was a great strategy.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
That's really fantastic.
It was really kind of fun to see them like squirm in their chairs about their hourly rate.
You got to cut the bleed at some point on that. That's crazy. Was that one of the toughest mediations that you've ever had to deal with?
No, it was just one of them.
What was one of the toughest mediations that you've
There's so many, Eric. Almost every single one was difficult. I'm just not kidding you, because the hard, the divorces where they're about ready to kill each other, the probate cases where they've been fighting in the sandbox for years, and the ex-wives and the new wives and then that wife. And, it's just the business dispute. They're just people that are angry and upset and frustrated. And it's almost every single one had an element of that.
Yeah. And I'm sure you heard a lot. That's our final offer. We can't give you anything more than that.
Yeah.
How do you break that down?
You just have to, sometimes it's scary because sometimes you can go over the top. I mean, one time we had this with a really good lawyer in town, and he said, that's it, we're done. And I looked at his client, and I knew the client had more in there. And so, the attorney was shocked because, when he says he's done, this is not a guy you play around with. And I looked at the lawyer, not the lawyer, but the client, and he was from another, he was from another country, and he had different ways of doing things. But I just looked at him, and when he first met, he didn't like the idea that there was a female lawyer at all, and the lawyer didn't even tell him. So I think he wanted to about kill me. But in about 5 minutes, I grew up with 3 brothers, so we just got right on it. And I said, I have an idea. And I looked straight at the lawyer, and the lawyer said, I told you we're done. Why are you still talking to him? I said, because I am talking to him. And I said, I think I can get this done. but I need for you to trust me, and I need for you to give me X amount of dollars. And I said, and I promise you, if I can't get it done, I won't come in and ever ask you for another penny. The lawyer said, this is crazy. You know that's never, ever going to work. And the guy looked at me, and he goes, I trust you. Go do it. And we got the darn case settled. But that was a risk on my part, because I totally ticked the lawyer off.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, you know, the next couple of days, the lawyer called me back. He goes, you were right. He goes, I'm still not mad at you, but I was just shocked.
Yeah. Well, and you also had his respect, so.
So it was good. That was a fun one.
That's funny. Did you ever have to, did you have like a decompression ritual after some really difficult mediations or anything? Or
Not really.
Never took it home or anything?
No, I was really good about that. If I felt really frustrated, just get in a hot shower and be done with it, because it's over with.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I would do sometimes, what would be frustrating to me, if I couldn't get something done, that would bother me. And then I would sometimes call the lawyers the next day and say, is there anything else that you can think of? And sometimes you just can't get them done, because you can't make people do anything. Everybody has free will, and they have a right to make bad decisions.
Right.
I mean, I had one that I begged the lawyer from the other coast to settle it. And 3 years later, the guy calls me up and he says, you know what, I just want you to know, if we ever have another mediation, we just finished our trial. We got creamed. Everything happened exactly like you said that it would.
Wow.
And I wish I had known you better and taken your advice. I feel like I really let my client down. He goes, so if we're ever in a mediation again and you tell me something like that, I'm going to listen. Well, because you all learn from these things. But, you know, sometimes you just see the writing on the wall because you're not involved in it. You know, and so I got really good at being able to see the different sides of the same coin. And if you're the litigator and you've put so much effort and energy into it, sometimes you just can't see the forest for the trees anymore.
You got to step back at some point. Or you need somebody to help you step back so you can see the forest through the trees.
And the sad part is I tried very carefully to tell him all of the bad things, but he was so caught into it, and he didn't know me well enough. And I don't think he, you know, respected me enough to really take what I said. But that was, yeah. And, you know, and I'm sure he felt really bad for the client, too, because there was a big offer on the table. And the lady would have been, you know, doing way better. But he wanted to go for that little more. You know, it's just the more. And that's part of the problem. Sometimes lawyers need to realize these clients need closure. They don't need the more. That $100,000 just may not be worth it.
Yeah. So if there's any advice you could give lawyers going into mediation, or, you know, rules of mediation, do you have any recommendations?
Just be really, really, really prepared, and prepare your client too. And don't try to tell your client what the result's going to be, and pick a good mediator. Pick somebody who's going to help get the problem done. Because I think, you know, if you have a bad lawyer and you have a bad mediator, you're not getting anywhere. If you have a good mediator and two bad lawyers, you may or may not get anywhere. But, you know, you have to be prepared, and you have to, you know, try to remember that this is your client's case, not your case.
Is there anything that you like to see from lawyers before mediation begins that would help you assess the case?
Yeah, always, you know, send a summary. You can't believe how many times you get complicated cases and people don't send you anything. And like I told her on the ride over, don't send me a banker's box at 4 p.m. when the mediation is the next day. Somebody got charged an awful lot of money for that, and the mediator is not going to be able to read that.
Yeah.
So send it ahead. I had tons of people that would send me things to my home in notebooks with wonderful little indexes a week before. I'd read every single time. But, you know, don't not send somebody something, and don't send it at the last minute, or because if you're doing that, don't bother sending it at all.
Yeah. All right. What's the most unusual request that you've ever received?
I don't really get unusual requests. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't know. Anything funny or unusual from lawyers that have requested something of you during or before mediation?
No.
No? Okay.
I don't know that they would be really too ready to do that, because I have to say I was very frank and to the point. So if you were asking me something, you might be surprised at the direct type of answers you might get from me.
Yeah.
I would never have made a judge because I have been told and reported the conversations I've had during mediation. But I am as frank and straight as can be. And we had one mediation, and we were obviously in caucus, and the lawyer said, I can't believe you're sitting here telling me all of this stuff. And I looked at him and started laughing. I said, why does this surprise you? That's why you hire me, to tell you like it is. And I said, and I'm sorry, but I'm now telling your client like it is. And he started laughing. He goes, you're right. Okay, I get it. But, you know, that's who I am. That's who I've always been. And I was very much that way during mediation. Some people hated it, and some people wouldn't use me. And that's fun, you know. But they didn't usually ask me unusual things because they probably would get a very frank response.
Any funny story that you'd like to tell without mentioning names?
Oh, Eric, there's just so
Too
many.
many.
I wouldn't even know where to start. You know, it's just people are so darn interesting. They really are. I mean, it was so much fun to work with so many smart lawyers. And some of the clients were just brilliant. I mean, it was fun. Every single day, you got to meet so many interesting people.
I love that.
It really was pretty incredible.
You can really tell from your answers your love for people and your love for what you
Oh, and I
did as
loved
a
what I
mediator.
did. I mean, and honestly, it just got to the point where, you know, this whole Zoom mediation, you know, I'd be, like you said, I wouldn't give up, but I couldn't be on these computers for 12 hours at a time. It's just too much.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked till I was 70 years old. I think that was a good run.
Yep, absolutely.
After 45 years, my boots are hung up, baby.
Did you, how many years did you mediate with Zoom, I guess, post-COVID?
The whole time. I mean, I wasn't doing all Zoom. I much prefer live mediations. But in the high-end probate cases that I had a really good niche at the end for several years, you know, there's just multiple parties in different countries or different parts of the state, and the amount of money they save in the plane tickets and the hotels and the cars and all the rest of it, I can understand why it's more practical for them to do it that way. But it's exhausting on the mediator.
All right. Is there something that people in the legal community would be surprised to learn about you that they don't know?
Probably about my multiply handicapped child. Yeah.
Interesting. When your career is looked back on by your family, by the bar, by the people whose cases you helped resolve, what do you hope they say about you?
I hope they say that she did her very best. That's what I hope. That's all we can always do. And you guys, I don't think you can look back and second guess yourself. If you've done the best you can at any time during any circumstances, at that time, that's all you could do. So just try to do your best.
Is there anything that you understand about conflict after all these years of doing mediations that you'd like other people to understand?
Communication. I think the key thing with all of it is if people have a problem, talk about it as quickly as possible and try to listen to the other person, even if you don't understand or agree. If you can start having some kind of understanding as to why the other person is upset, even if you don't think you did anything wrong, it's just people don't communicate anymore. And so many of these litigations could have been resolved if people had just stopped and tried to have a face-to-face, much better than on a phone. You know, I think you have more response when I can look at you instead of talking to you on a phone and just hang up the phone or send a sharp email and just, you know, click off and send it. If you and I are sitting, and I've always tried to do that, if I have a problem with somebody, I've only had one person in my entire life that I could not get something resolved because they just refused to talk. But if you are honestly hearing and listening, there is no problem that's too difficult that can't get resolved. In every single mediation, I tried to start with that hope, telling them there is no problem that is too difficult that cannot be resolved. There is an answer to all of it. But what you have to be willing to do, it's like one of those things that they have at the country kitchen. You have to keep moving the things so that it all falls into place and all of a sudden it's solved. It's like that's what it's
Mm-hmm.
like, the Rubik's Cube. You've got to keep moving the pieces and changing it and trying something different. If that doesn't work, don't hit the wall until you find a way, because there's always a way.
I like that.
Yeah,
Judge?
That was fantastic. I agree. And, communication has been a common theme, I think, through these interviews, and how people have forgotten the importance of how to communicate. So I think that's a really important.
It's a good thing, and I think that as we get more technology involved, and people text more, and people email more, and people are playing games with people in another country from far away, it's just the face-to-face, the eyeball to eyeball, the person to person. We have to not lose that, because there's too much that can be lost in not having that be paramount.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a great note to end on, too. So,
Yes.
Tara, thank you so much for
You're so
showing up
welcome.
today and for doing this legacy interview series. It's important, like you said, to preserve the history of the bar and of the great lawyers that have practiced here in Collier County and around the area. And we really appreciate you. I know from myself, from having worked with you over the years, I miss working with you, and I know you've beaten me over the head a couple times in a good way, and we certainly respect you for that. And
Well, you were always a pleasure. You were always one of the well-prepared people who respected the other side and who had a very good control over the situation. It's a pleasure to work with good lawyers. It just is.
I appreciate that.
And thank you very much. And I wish you all well.
All right.
And until we meet again.
Absolutely. And this wraps up one of our legacy interview series with Tara Miller Dane. Thank you.
All right. That was fantastic, Tara.